bit to get across tonight. Joining me now, Sky News political contributor, the wonderful Chris Uhlmann. Chris, welcome. I want to start tonight with an early discussion about something that will be ubiquitous in a couple of years' time. It's already here. It's going to grow and grow and grow. And of course, this is artificial intelligence. A few stories around in the last couple of days. One is which the Business Council of Australia, they're warning the government not to get too heavy-handed, not to drown it in regulation. They want artificial intelligence sort of unfettered because they want innovation, they say. However, today the new Science and Industry Minister, Tim Ayres, he has signalled the need for regulation and he sees a very strong role here for the trade unions. Have a listen.
The Australian challenge is to lean in and to adopt artificial intelligence to lift productivity and living standards, to deliver investment in infrastructure and capability, and to protect our security. So I'll be looking in particular at how we can strengthen worker voice and agency as technology is diffused into every workplace in the Australian economy. And I look forward to working with our trade union movement on all of this.
Now, I tend to agree with the Minister here and the unions on this. I worked for Richard Alston at the time the internet arrived in Australia, and there was a whole debate, this is the late 90s, early 2000s, about the government stepping in and putting some sort of ring fencing, some regulation around the internet. Now, that was screamed at by business and the government rolled over. It didn't regulate the internet. It agreed that it should be as unfettered as possible. I think we'd all agree now, yes, there's been a lot good with the internet, but it's also brought us a lot of harm. And I think with AI, I don't want to end up doing what we do with the internet and outsourcing the whole thing, indeed our sovereignty, to all those billionaires in Silicon Valley.
Oh yeah, Peter, we're told this is a workplace revolution, right? So there should be some workers involved in this revolution. And the thing that I've noticed about ChatGPT, which I began looking at last year, is how rapidly it has acquired more and more knowledge and how useful a tool it's become. And you can see it replacing a whole lot of white-collar jobs down the track. Now, I've heard everything from it will be a workplace boon to the fact that it will be Armageddon. Let's assume that we can't know the future and it might be somewhere in between. And assume also there will be benefits and there will be costs. Well, we should be trying to measure those things. And I think government policy should be trying to make sure that we get more benefits than costs out of this. My fear, though, Peter, is that policy will lag a long way behind this technology. We will be racing to catch up.
Yeah, we know China is so much further ahead than most Western nations. We also know, Chris, and this is to your usual issues that you focus on, energy, it needs gargantuan amounts of energy. It's not going to survive AI in this country or flourish if it's just a bit of wind and a bit of solar. This is why America's going back with 3 Mile Island into nuclear. But again, what worries me, let's say it replaces, as Dick Smith once said to me, about a third of the workforce. What do these human beings do? Like, where is the dignity of their work every day? What's their purpose? How do they earn money? Are we supposed to just have everybody or a good third of the population on the dole? I mean, these are, I think, some of the challenges that we're going to talk about. I feel like we're just being hit with AI and we're scrambling, behind trying to catch up.
I think scrambling is the word, and we have seen what's happened when you outsource blue-collar jobs, right? What happened to men in the 1990s who were bounced out of a job. They were told there would be new jobs, and in fact, none really came along, and a lot of them went into disability pensions, and were very, very disappointed with the way that both major parties essentially backed that in. And then guess what? There are all these people voting for one nation, and everyone wondered where all these angry white men came from. The same thing happened in the United States on a much larger scale. Now those who are in white-collar jobs may well face the same kind of crisis. So we absolutely should be having a conversation about this. I don't know that we'll be having one that's fast enough to keep up with the pace of change.
Another conversation, certainly the Libs from South Australia want, is net zero. They have taken a formal vote in the Liberal Party, management body, if I can call it that, to say that they don't want net zero and they want the federal party to make this their official position. There's some moderates, of course, they're not happy about this, but this is a party division. It's got a bit of clout. Are we going to see the beginning of the end, perhaps, of net zero?
Yeah, Peter, I certainly don't think that this is the last division that's going to have this kind of vote. And now you have the circumstance in South Australia where the division has a different view than the Labor Party in Parliament there, and a different view again from the Federal Party, which has got this under review. And I think it's a perfectly reasonable argument to have, because I think that there are really sound arguments against net zero. One is that it's a target, it's not actually a policy, and we don't have the policies in place to do it. We don't have the technology in place to do it. The major economies of the world essentially aren't doing it, and it will cost you trillions of dollars to try. Now, they're all reasonable arguments, Peter, that I think reasonable people could make. My problem with the Liberal Party is that I don't think that they have the capacity to make those arguments, or at least to decide on a position that they can defend. And when we've seen them weigh into energy arguments in the past, they leave the rest of us basically struggling to try and make sensible arguments, because they've so cruelled the playing field along the way. So, look, I think it would be a great idea for the Liberal Party to get its act together and to try and work out how it might win the next election in South Australia, whatever its policies might be. But I think there's this too, that if you've got nothing to say, say nothing. For God's sake, shut up until you get your act together. Although I doubt that's likely to be a policy position that they will adopt, Peter. They'll fight among themselves and do themselves incredible damage and do this argument damage along the way.
Tough but fair, Chris Uhlmann. You're on fire tonight. Hey, part of the, I guess, concern I have is I look over the horizon. We talked about AI, we've talked about net zero, all these big, and obviously the rise of China too, all these big issues facing our country. I want to see our parliamentarians have adult debates about this stuff. I want to see them, put the rancour to one side, have the conversations in the parliament, do the proper inquiries, not the cursory inquiries, but the proper inquiries that they used to have 10 and 20 years ago into legislation, into big issues, get around the country, debate the big stuff, right? How can they do that if we're going to have the skinniest parliamentary sitting schedule in 20 plus years? I mean, just 40 days between now and the end of the year for the House of Reps. I think this is extraordinary, and I don't think this is what Australians voted for.
Yeah, well, the thing is, as you know, Peter, is that the one iron rule of politics is if you have the numbers, you make the rules, and the government has the numbers, it's now making the rules. And I've always found that governments, no matter what their stripe, really don't like transparency all that much. And I would love to see some adult debates in Parliament. Unfortunately, I do tend to believe at the moment that there is essentially a dominant of ideas in the lower and upper house. And if the Liberal Party decides that it's going to back in net zero, well, then you're not going to see much difference when it comes to energy debates. And you do have to wonder why people would bother changing their vote next time around if that's a big issue, if everyone's on the same page. So, my issue about federal parliament at the moment is that everyone's on the same page and will agree with each other, and that we may see some very bad legislation as a result of that. So I'd rather they sat even fewer days and gave them less opportunity to pass bad laws that we're all going to have to suffer with.
I hear you. I mean, I want small government, not big government. And the problem with them going to Canberra too often is they tend to make government bigger and bigger to justify their existence. But I do want to have these debates. I feel like I'm crying at the moon. I want government to take us into their confidence. I want business to step up, business to stop being cowards and sitting on the fence on this stuff. I want business to have the arguments. As I said, I'm prepared to back the unions, at least having more say over something like AI. But at least treat us like the adult voters that we are, and don't just, take our ballot and forget about us for the next 3 years. I think this is really important.
I think we're at a time of enormous global change. It is raking change. It will have an effect on this country. That debate was not really represented at the last election. It's not being represented at the moment. And look at the things you've covered this evening. Defence. The Prime Minister says we live in a different part of the world to the United Kingdom. Damn right we do. We live in the Pacific, which is going to be one of the most volatile regions in the world. And particularly if China decides it's going to take Taiwan, we need to be having a discussion about what we spend on defence. We need to be having a discussion about the benefits and the threats of artificial intelligence, and we really need to be having a discussion about energy, because it is the master resource. Without it, nothing else will work. So all of these things are big questions. I'd love to see a big debate. Unfortunately, most of the debates we have are juvenile.
The Greens like to say that they're really progressive. They're certainly more progressive than the Conservative side of politics. But the Conservative side of politics has more Aboriginal people in the Parliament as their branded MPs than the Greens. The Greens have lost Dorinda Cox. She's defected to the Labor Party. What's been going on here?
Yeah, well, look, it reminds me of Oscar Wilde's. I was saying, right, to lose one Indigenous senator looks like a misfortune. To lose two looks like carelessness. And I don't know what it says about the internals of the Greens political party, but I will say this, Peter, I've got an old world view when it comes to being a senator who was elected for a political party. And that is, if you decide to jump out of the party, you should jump out of Parliament. I think she should resign from Parliament. And it doesn't matter who it is, a Liberal senator, a Labor senator, a Green senator, you were elected on behalf of your party, on behalf of your state, and if you're going to jump out of that party, then you should have the decency to resign. And I wonder how people in the Labor Party in Western Australia feel about having an extra senator and what that might mean for the ticket next time a vote comes up in the next election.
Dance with the one who brung ya. I'm with you. That's my view as well. Thank you, Chris.